Just occasionally in these catalogues you come across an object that has a surprisingly modern application. Take this piece of jewellery. You just can't believe at first glance that this is 2nd or 3rd century BC. This Hellenistic wreath would have been applied to some gorgeous Grecian girl who was dressing for a special occasion. The delicacy and the exquisite way in which this thing has been made fair takes your breath away. We've got a branch that spans the middle that's wrapped in bark, and then sprouting from that are all these absolutely naturalistic looking flowers, some of them scented by glass beads. And what's it worth? Well, the auction estimate is £10,000 to £15,000. But what will it bring on the special auction day? For some people, animals modelled in bronze are incredibly interesting and collectible. In the 19th century, they were called animaliae. But way back in antiquity, this Greco-Parthian handle that was once part of a larger vessel displays all the characteristics of a 19th century animaliae bronze, in that it's cast in metal with a lot of detail, plus the added advantage of centuries of patination. And that's what gives this thing its real style, age and character. But this is not just some frozen lump of old bronze. You need to handle it, and when you handle it, you get the sense that this is a wild cat, because the sculptor that created this over 2,000 years ago understood what the physical energy of a leaping big cat was all about. It's not only snarling, but it's got a tufted mane, all frozen in this gorgeous patinated original bronze. What's it worth? The auction estimate is £5,000 to £7,000. Is that a leap of faith or what? And now for something completely different and incredibly rare. This is an Egyptian bronze figure of a god called Amun-Min. Amun-Min is associated with regeneration and fertility, and if you look carefully, you can see exactly what I mean. This is about as rare as a hen's tooth. Bronze figures related to fertility are often seen from the Roman period, but when it comes to something Egyptian, potentially between 3,000 and 3,500 years old, it is extremely rare. What's it worth? The auction estimate is £20,000 to £30,000. Not much per centimetre. What were you doing on the 12th of April, 340 AD, 1,800 years ago? Difficult to say? Well, not if you owned this sliver of wood, it wouldn't be. On this tablet of wood, in Roman cursive script, is the last will and testament of a gentleman who is basically saying that he wants to leave everything to his daughter and 2 sons. But in the event of his daughter predeceasing him, he'd like everything just to go to the 2 boys. All very straightforward and actually incredibly rare. Just look at those lines of script, completely filling the fielded panel. That's the cutout piece. And this is on a piece of timber which is wafer thin. See that? It's not barely 1/4 of an inch thick, and it's survived all that time. That is the most extraordinary legal document that I've ever seen, which makes this thing extremely rare and therefore valuable. The auction estimate is £15,000 to £20,000. Doesn't mention my name in there, unfortunately. On the face of it, this looks like a miniature shield. It's a disc that's got applied to it a number of bosses One of the bosses is missing and there's some damage on the top. But actually, not only is it in the form of a miniature shield, it's actually a piece of jewellery. If I turn it over, you can see the vestiges of the pin that would have been used probably to secure it to a cloak. But the really beautiful and interesting thing about it is the style of decoration. This disc has been geometrically divided into 4 circles which are entwined, and within each of the circles you've got these lovely zoomorphic animals. And the decoration has been created by finely engraving the silver surface and then filling each of the engraved lines with a form of black bitumen so that the engraved sections stand out. And overall, this thing is in brilliant condition. It's about 1,000 years old, 1,000 or 1,100 years old, and is basically a Viking piece of jewellery. Delightful. Old, rare and valuable. Well, the auction estimate is £20,000 to £30,000. Stand by. If only an object could speak, what would this gold ring have to say for itself? At first glance, it is enormous. If you put it on your finger ordinarily, it's completely loose. That's probably because it was made as a glove ring. Some pontiff would have worn this ring, and immediately visible would have been the face of our Lord contained within this lobed plaque. And on either side, very unusually, you have John the Evangelist and Mary, both of whom were present at the crucifixion of our Lord. It dates from the medieval period, late 14th or early 15th century, and was possibly made in Constantinople. It's as rare as a hen's tooth, it's a delight to handle, and is worth between probably £8,000 to £12,000. But who knows, it could make a whole lot more. Historical importance is a phrase that is often abused. It's applied to objects that aren't that important historically. But in TimeLine's auction, we have an object that exactly fits that bill. Can you imagine the thrill for me to be able to handle and to examine up close and personal a ring that once belonged to Joan of Arc? If there is one icon of ancient French law which excites passions today between the English and the French, it is the saintly figure of Joan d'Arc. The 16-year-old girl who, for the benefit of France, tried her utmost to defeat the invader, the English. This ring was described precisely by her in her trial. It's a devotional ring. It's inscribed with a script that reads Jesus and Mary. This ring was given by her on the eve of her death, and it has passed through a variety of collections in Britain with an incredible portfolio of provenance and notes to prove that this was once Joan of Arc's ring. To feel the ring snugly fit your finger, a ring made around 1400 that was given to Joan of Arc by her parents as a devotional ring, is an incredible thrill. The big question is, what can such a historically important and rare object possibly be worth at auction? The trite answer is, what two people are prepared to pay for it? But in this instance, really, the nation of France should be bidding to acquire this historically important artefact. Will France bid for it? Or will it be the English? It will be decided in the auction, so just stand by for this battle royal. So what exactly is a votive object? Well, in terms of this vessel, if you wanted to present your god with some food or drink, you might do it in a vessel like this. This particular vessel is ancient. It dates from about 2,000 years BC, so it's approaching 4,000 years old. It's made of a curious material, bitumen, and I guess the craftsman that made this was imitating another substance, a harder stone, which would be difficult to carve, as opposed to bitumen, which I guess would be easier. What's lovely about it is the nearly complete nature of the vessel itself. It's a surprisingly sophisticated piece. These reticulations and the piercings give you the sense that these squat figures are there in the round, and the only thing that's lacking, it would appear, are these little cutouts, the almost Pietra Dura type inlaid areas, which might have been filled with coral or stone. In short, it's a fascinating object and incredibly rare from an early period. People who love their Mesopotamian art will really go for this object, estimated at auction between £30,000 and £40,000. If things were going really bad and you were a Roman centurion, your last-ditch weapon of choice would be this thing. It's called a Pujo, and this one dates from the 3rd century BC. It's a particularly nice example that belonged once to a higher ranking officer, and you can tell that because it's got an iron handle onlaid with bronze strips. And what's particularly lovely, I think, is the terminal with its 2 crescent piercings. The blade on either side has grooves, which are called fullers, and the idea with these grooves is that when the blade is thrust into the enemy, you want to be able to take it out quick. You don't want any suction preventing you from taking the blade out smartish, and that's what the idea is with those grooves, which is kind of groovy, really. There we are. That's the gruesome bit. The next gruesome part is the auction estimate. A good quality example like this is expected to bring in the auction between £2,000 and £3,000. This is incredibly heavy. If you could pick this up, you would be amazed how dense the timber is. It's made of wood, but of a special timber known in the Pacific area as ironwood. That's because the timber is practically as dense and heavy as iron itself. It belonged to a people who had never enjoyed any metal at all in their lives until the Europeans started to explore the Pacific Rim in the 18th century. Up to that point, they would have to craft everything that they wanted to make out of timber using simple tools, usually with shell-sharp edges. But this tool is a serious war club, and if you look carefully where these fissures have been carved into that leading edge of this club, it's densely packed with paint and muck and possibly sawdust and, who knows, even blood. Unfortunately, though, there is a problem, is that this terminal end has been reduced. You can just see a bit of wriggle work there. See that zigzaggy line, which had a practical purpose, because that's the handle end of the club, and it should go on to about there, and that is what would provide you with your grip. It's a magnificent example, though, and the auction estimate is £800 to £1,200.